Welcome to Diplomacy in International Relations by Bastian Freiburg. Just a quick note before we start. This deep dive is generated with AI, and all the information has been verified by Bastian Freiburg. So today, we're diving into something pretty fundamental, I think, for anyone interested in international relations, international politics, or even Danish politics. The question is, does everyone actually want peace?
It seems obvious, right? But maybe not.
Exactly. We're looking at excerpts from Shivad or Crig og Fred, Idag 5 Afterward. And honestly, this work really challenges the, standard view of war and peace.
It does. It pushes back quite hard.
So our mission today is basically to unpack these ideas, see how they connect to what's happening globally, maybe challenge some assumptions, yours and ours.
And figure out what it all means for understanding the world.
Okay, let's jump right in. The source starts by questioning this core belief: peace good, war bad. Full stop. It even uses the UN Charter. Its whole purpose being to prevent another major war as the prime example of this mindset.
And what's really striking, right off the bat, is how directly it confronts that. The author basically says, hang on, what if? What if some people, some groups, don't actually see peace as the ultimate goal?
Yeah.
Which immediately clashes with concepts like the UN's human security idea.
Right. The idea that everyone just wants to live safely and peacefully.
This text asks, well, is that really universal? Or is that an assumption we make?
And it gets, well, maybe a bit uncomfortable from there. The text suggests that for some, war isn't just, the worst case scenario.
No, it could be seen as an opportunity.
An opportunity, a chance for a different life, maybe one they think is better, achieved through conflict.
Which is, difficult to wrap your head around given the terrible cost of war.
Definitely. But thinking about international politics, this view suggests some actors might see disruption, even violent disruption, as a way to achieve their goals, to change the power balance.
It forces us to look past the simple idea of conflict as just a failure of peace.
The Thorst talks about war as meaning-making.
Ah, yes, that's a key point.
The idea that, for some, conflict itself provides a purpose, a meaning that maybe peace doesn't offer.
It's a powerful idea.
The example given is an IS fighter in Syria who sees the war not as a tragedy, but as a holy duty, part of building a caliphate.
And that's such a stark contrast to the idea of peace as the universal aim. It highlights just how subjective these concepts are.
Totally. What's destruction for one is purpose for another.
And that difference in perspective is huge when you try to understand why some conflicts just drag on and on. How do you even start diplomacy when the fundamental goals are that far apart?
It's a massive challenge for international relations. And the text also complicates the idea of peace itself.
The Tacitus quote.
Yeah, they created a desert and called it peace. That hits hard.
It really does. It shows how peace can just be a label for oppression, for something achieved through violence.
So what is peace then, in international relations terms? Is it just no big wars between states?
Or is it more, like actual security, justice, well-being for individuals?
Because the source points out, for someone living under constant drone surveillance or in crushing poverty, their daily life isn't exactly peaceful, even if there's no official war.
Exactly. The absence of declared war doesn't mean the presence of genuine peace.
And the North Korea example fits here too, right? Developing nuclear weapons while technically in a state of ceasefire, not peace.
It shows that gray area between war and peace can be incredibly dangerous with huge global security implications.
And then you just have the raw reality of refugees fleeing conflict. Risking everything. That tells you all you need to know about the absence of peace in their lives.
These examples really force us to look beyond simplistic definitions. Peace isn't just one thing. For people facing threats or oppression, talk about the value of peace from afar might sound, well, hollow.
Detached, yeah.
We need to consider the lived experience, not just the formal status between states.
The text then zooms in on the individual. And this is where it explores the maybe the allure of war.
Right. The idea that it offers something personally compelling.
Something everyday peaceful life might lack. That comparison is pretty stark. Storming a trench versus mowing the lawn.
Yeah. It really makes you think about that human need for something intense, something meaningful, perhaps.
And looking at why individuals get involved, the text mentions people like Joanna Polani, the Danish Kurdish fighter, or even someone like George Orwell going to fight in Spain.
Yeah, people feeling this pull towards action, towards being part of something significant, even dangerous.
It suggests that peace, if it just means quiet stability, might not fulfill those deeper human desires for purpose or belonging for everyone.
Which is a challenging thought.
It is. And the source notes that for the soldier on the ground, the experience itself, being in it, can be as important as who wins or loses strategically.
The feeling of contribution, of being part of that intense collective effort.
Understanding that might be important when we think about why people join armed groups. It's not always just politics or economics.
No, there can be these deeper, more personal, almost existential motivations at play. Addressing conflict might mean looking at those needs too.
Okay, moving on slightly. The text makes this point that often it's the established powers, the ones benefiting from the current system, who are the strongest advocates for peace.
Right. Which can lead others to see defending peace as basically defending an unfair or undesirable status quo.
That creates a real tension. Thinking about Danish politics, for instance, our foreign policy debates often touch on this, don't they?
Absolutely. Are we upholding a stable order that works for us primarily, or are we genuinely trying to address the grievances of those left out?
Whose peace are we talking about?
Exactly. Is it a just peace for everyone, or are we mainly protecting the existing structures? That's a vital question for Denmark's role in the world.
And then the text gets quite critical of some views on international organizations and alliances.
It brings up Donald Trump questioning NATO.
And Marie Carip's past comments about potentially working with Putin to dismantle the EU. Pretty radical stuff.
Very. And the source suggests this desire to tear down existing structures might come from a place that, well, underestimates what could happen next.
Like a lack of political imagination, as the author puts it.
Sort of, yeah. Taking the stability provided by NATO or the EU for granted, maybe? Forgetting why they were built in the first place, especially in Europe with its history.
It's a serious point. Maybe the consequences of them not being there aren't fully grasped by those who want them gone.
As if the current stability is just natural, not something built and maintained.
Which definitely connects to debates we have in Denmark about our commitments to the EU, to NATO.
For sure. The text seems to warn against this kind of thinking, that just dismantling things will somehow automatically lead somewhere better, ignoring the historical lessons about instability.
Which brings us towards the end point about adopting a more realistic view.
Yes, acknowledging that, like it or not everyone wants peace above all else.
And that war, tragically, has often been a driver of historical change.
And this realism isn't about liking war, the text stresses that. It's about understanding the world clearly to navigate its challenges.
Which is crucial for any nation's foreign policy, including Denmark's. You need that clear-eyed view.
Absolutely.
And finally, the importance of institutions and learning from history, the Burke reference. Society is a contract between past, present, future.
Right. Valuing the structures built often painfully to maintain peace based on past tragedies.
And the danger of forgetting those lessons for short-term political reasons.
A warning against disregarding historical experience when making decisions today, especially in foreign policy.
The conclusion is pretty strong. Be vigilant against threats to peace and have the will to stand firm.
It frames peace not as passive, but as something requiring active defense and commitment.
And for a country like Denmark, given our position in history, that message about vigilance and commitment feels particularly relevant.
Definitely. It highlights why we need an ongoing, informed discussion in Denmark about our global role, our alliances, and our commitment to security, based on both history and a realistic view of today's world.
So this deep dive into Hivader Krieg og Fred Idag 5 afterward really has given us a lot to think about, hasn't it? A challenging view on peace and conflict, with real implications for international politics and how we see Denmark's place.
It forces us to question assumptions, like whether peace is truly everyone's goal, and to look at the complex reasons people might turn to conflict.
We've seen how peace itself can be ambiguous, and how desires for meaning or change can sometimes overshadow the wish for stability.
Which leaves a big question for you, the listener, to think about. How does this resonate with your view of current global events and the role of different actors, Denmark included?
Are our current ways of thinking about peace and security really up to the task, given all these complex motivations?
Something to ponder.
Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive into diplomacy and international relations. If you found this discussion valuable, please do follow the podcast.
And maybe consider giving it a 5-star rating. It really helps discussions like these reach more people.
Thanks again for listening.